of describing the service you get at home. This was one of the last times due to COVID that we were actually able to go out. He absolutely loved fried clams. And so this was done in the spring of 2019 when we could go out because it was all outdoors and it was a nice day. We went up to Essex and he got to have his last fried clams at Woodman's. And for those of you in New England, you know what that means. This I have because it's one of the few serious pictures I have of him.
He's a handsome.
Almost every other picture I have of him, he's smiling. And somehow, so he either was doing something serious or it was one of those occasions when he was mad at me. Surprisingly happened fairly often.
Oh, that's a nice one.
That's a nice one.
That's a nice one with his artwork on the back.
Sorry, Joseph, I
Oh,
muted
I thought I might have used some foul language or something. He generally always smiled. He always had a wonderful disposition. Although I have to say, he didn't really have what I would call a sense of humor like most of us have. For example, we would be sitting on the sofa watching South Park or The Office, and I would be laughing my head off, and he would say, what are you laughing at? What's so funny? I don't get it. But he would often say things that were inadvertently funny. For example, one time we were driving down the New Jersey Turnpike and we were going by Newark Airport. And for those of you who have driven that route, you see the line of planes coming in as they're preparing to land. So it almost looks like a bird formation. And he said, aren't those planes awfully low? I said, well, it does make it a lot easier for them to land so the people can get off.
Yeah.
I don't think he spoke to me until Perth Amboy after that. He traveled a lot with me, so it was a lot of fun actually to take him back to Europe 50 years after he had gone for the first time. Although traveling with me isn't a lot of fun because I make a very ambitious itinerary and we go to every museum and so forth. But he always had a good time. But I'm not sure that he really enjoyed traveling that much. I think his favorite part of traveling was the before and after, telling people, I'm going to New Orleans next week.
Yeah.
And then being able to afterwards say, oh, I was in New Orleans last week. I'm not sure he actually enjoyed the trip itself. He just really liked the idea of letting people know that he had been somewhere. But there were a number of places that we really enjoyed going, and we would go back. One of our favorites was Savannah, Georgia, which is how we wound up with the name Savannah on a standard poodle. We enjoyed going to the Brandywine Valley a lot in Pennsylvania. So that was almost a regular Christmas trip to go to Longwood and see the Christmas decorations and to go see the Yuletide at Winterthur. There were a number of things that, you know, were sort of interesting in our relationship. As he declined in his health and his abilities, I took on more and more of everyday tasks. The thing he really hated to give up and hated to entrust to me was the laundry. Now, he was teaching online up until he died. And I was his IT support for everything. And whenever there was any problem, Joseph, come here. I'm having trouble with the computer. He had complete faith in me for absolutely everything.
Except.
But he somehow didn't believe that I would be able to figure out how to turn that knob on the washing machine and set the load and then take the laundry out and put it in a dryer. He never quite got over that. I don't think he ever adjusted to it.
I just was kicked out here.
For those of you who admired the photographs of him, and he was very photogenic, particularly once he got his beard. The beard was my doing. Well, it was between me and the dogs. We had come home from something one day in the winter, and at that time, this was many years ago, and he would take the dogs out for the evening walk. And he took them out on the front steps, and it was winter, and it was icy, and he went flying when the dogs yanked him off the steps, and he broke his hip. So while he was recovering, I said, well, don't bother shaving. It's too much work to grow a beard. And I think everybody has loved him more with the beard than in his pre-beard days. Yep. And there are his dogs barking. You can hear them in the background. There's something going on. But speaking of his teaching, because of being a teacher, he would, of course, know hundreds of people, not just from teaching, but from everything else he did. If you were in a hurry to do an errand, you didn't really want to go with him to the store because invariably he was going to run into somebody. My daughter had you for her teacher, and we would go at places where you would never expect to meet anybody. There was one time in Maine, at the building we had, the shop was on the first floor and the living facilities were upstairs. And a couple came in with their child, and in order to make conversation, I noticed that the man had a Penn State cap on, and I just mentioned, I said, my partner went to Penn State. Did you go there too? And he said yes. And of course, when it's something that large, you never know the other people. And I said, well, his name is Ralph Parenti. Oh, I know Ralph Parenti. In fact, we just went to the library used bookstore in town, and I bought one of his books that has his name written in it. So when he finally moved to online teaching only, I said, you're going to have to get used to the fact that your students aren't going to recognize you anymore. No, it still happened. We would still run into people everywhere, and they'd say, oh, I'm taking your online course. Amazing. Very few of us, I think, have that. He was very good to me. He had complete faith in almost everything I did. I did most of the driving. I'm just one of those people that doesn't like to ride in a car. I prefer to be the driver. And then, of course, as time went on, I did all of the driving. And I take it as a compliment that within 5 minutes of the ride, he would fall asleep. So to me, that meant, he was very comfortable. On the other hand, I also noticed that he had his rosary beads in his hand. So I'm a bit conflicted as to whether he was confident in me or whether he felt he needed some outside assistance. He was very, very gullible. I used to play tricks on him because I am sometimes a cruel person. And again, we'd be coming back and forth to Maine, and he'd be dozing off. But he'd wake up, and this, before the days of Easy Pass, we would have to, of course, pay at the toll booths. And by the way, I want the toll booths to come back because the nice people at the Maine Turnpike would always give you dog biscuits. In any event, he would doze off, and he'd usually wake up when he felt the brakes going on for the toll booth. And he was in charge of the toll money. How much is the toll? $40. He's getting out 220s. I could have retired on this. Another time we went to Martha's Vineyard, and we, of course, drove to the Cape and took the ferry over. And when we're about to dock, he notices the long stone jetty, and he says, well, what's that? I said, that's the entrance to the tunnel. There's a tunnel we could have used? Well, I didn't want to use it because, first of all, you have to go to Lowell to get on the tunnel, and it's a $30 toll. So I didn't think you'd want to do it. he saved absolutely every bit of paper. So as I mentioned earlier, if you ever sent him a card or anything, let me know. I can probably go in one of those myriad shopping bags and get it back for you. I feel like I'm an archivist going through. We've got the warranty cards from toaster ovens that we haven't had since 1984. Things that I can remember going to stores that are no longer in business. But when I go through his canceled checks and his credit card statements, it does bring back a lot of memories. Now, some of the family members may remember he used to buy furniture at David Beerwick's in Worcester, and I found the checks for when he bought his sofas and chairs. He had a sofa that was nothing unusual, but apparently when the upholstery wore out, he decided to have it reupholstered. Picked out a fabric, sent it out, and as things happen, the upholsterer called up and said that fabric is now out of stock. Can you pick out something else? So he went in, he picked out something else that he was just not that happy with, but at this point, you got to get it done, you got to get it done. Came home. His favorite dog, Velvet, did not like that fabric. She would claw at it, she would pull the threads out, and whenever she had to be sick, she would not go anywhere in the house, but she would go to that sofa. Ever had to clean up a half-digested mouse from a sofa? Fortunately, that sofa eventually went to the dump. But as I was going through his papers, he's got everything: school applications, report cards. He even saved lots of my things and things that I don't even know how he got a hold of. I don't know how they wound up here. He has these little cards that were filled in at the hospital when babies were born, giving the mother's name, the baby's weight and length, and the name. But they're for me and my brothers. I don't even remember seeing these, and somehow they wound up here. But one thing that I couldn't find were any photographs, and I'm sure they existed, of him with his Volkswagen Beetles. He had Beetles for years. I think his last one he had for almost 20 years. He just loved them. And then, of course, they stopped making the Beetle. He had to switch to something called, I think, the Volkswagen. I forget if he had to get the Golf or the Rabbit, but it just wasn't the same. So I went car shopping with him. And I'll tell you, if you want to take up 2 years of free evenings, you could have gone car shopping with him. It was unbelievable how much time he would put in to hunting for a new car. We looked at everything, and I thought, this is sensible. Why not look at everything? Because you don't buy a new car that often. Your needs have changed. You might want something different. But he always was used to a Volkswagen Beetle, basic, small, inexpensive. And somehow one night I wound up with him at a Chrysler dealership. And jokingly, I pointed to a Chrysler New Yorker that was like a circus wagon. And he bought it. I mean, this car had the computerized dashboard and that fake padded roof and the leather seats. And I mean, this thing was just the last thing you would expect him to own. But he just had a wonderful time with it. So it proves that apparently everybody can change. I did show some of his artwork earlier, and I've heard from some people. One offered me one of his paintings, but I said, you keep it, because one of the things that he did, especially when he was in art school, is he would share artwork. They would swap out, paintings. I'll give you one of mine, you have one of yours. So he not only has his paintings in the homes of other friends, and we also have paintings of his friends. So it's wonderful that, these artists shared things, probably because being artists, they had no money to buy anything else anyways. In any event, I will try and wrap this up so other people get a chance to talk. when people come into your life, you change. You know, and it's, I hope for the good. I didn't realize, you know, how long we've been together, but it was over 40 years.
Yeah.
And when we would go on a trip, you know, I'm not the easiest person to get along with sometimes. And unfortunately, he realized early on that I was always right. So that made things a lot easier. But there would often be little things he would do that would just set me off. And, you know, for example, one time we were on a plane, we were heading, I think, to San Francisco for a trip. And I asked him, I said, did you remember to take the guidebook? And his answer was, the guidebook for where? And I'm like, the guidebook for Spain. We're going to San Francisco. What guidebook do you think I mean? But, you know, on whether it was, you know, going on a long trip or just going back and forth to Maine, he would always say at the beginning, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to try and not get you mad. And when we would get back, you know, the highest compliment, you know, he could pay him and himself was, well, at least on this trip, I don't think I made you mad. So, no. The only thing that made me mad is you left me too soon. So, God bless him.
Cheers. Here, here.
Yes.
Here.
And happy birthday, Uncle Ralph.
Yes, and for those who don't know, it's his birthday today.
Yeah.
So now I will turn it over to other people to share their memories.
Okay, I'll go next. I'm going to share my screen. I've got some photos that you will have seen, some of these. That was beautiful, Joseph, by the way.
Yes.
One of the things that's so cool about gatherings like this, even though we're a million miles apart from each other, is we're all going to kind of get a different perspective of who Ralph was. And so I'm just going to like